Chapter 505. Such intense profound chi fluctuations. Yan Xiaoyi cried out in shock. It wasn't that she was making a fuss out of nothing, but the scene in front of her eyes was simply too shocking. This Death God Castle was indeed as its name suggested. It looked like a place where the Death God congregated, bringing along a dense death chi, which was extremely eerie. Whereas in the surroundings of Death God Castle, one could clearly sense the fluctuations of profound chi, which kept on sweeping the surroundings. Yiqing Luo gathered 20 over youngsters and according to the map's instructions, stood at the safest place. And this place coincidentally had a panoramic view of the entire Death God Castle. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes as she looked at the surroundings, towards the direction where the profound chi fluctuations were coming from. All of these were marked on the map. Even the time it took for the chi fluctuation device to change direction was clearly marked. This cheat was simply heaven-defying. At this moment, the mercenary group badge's effect was displayed. The magical beasts near Death God Castle not only had a sensitive sense of smell, their hearing was also very sensitive. Although there was Chi-Chi's sacred beast Chi, as well as Little Nine's sacred beast Prestige by his side, so she wasn't afraid that these magical beasts would hurt them. But, the minute these magical beasts moved, it would definitely attract the attention of Death God Castle's guards. Yiqing Luo made use of the mercenary group badge's voice transmission function as she spoke in a deep voice. There are profound chi fluctuations mechanisms all around. If the profound chi fluctuations were to sweep past you, you will be sliced into pieces by that energy. 20 over youngsters' expressions changed slightly. Along the way, they saw Yiqing Luo studying the map. It was obvious that DMO Xian allowed Yiqing Luo to do this mission. Other than leaving Little Nine by her side to protect her, he naturally did something to ensure her safety. This map was given to Yiqing Luo by DMO Xian. With this map, the youngsters' heavy hearts were more or less soothed. But they had not expected that even with the map, facing the heavily guarded Death God Castle, which was filled with mechanisms, they were still helpless. If they were swept, they would be sliced into pieces. This was just too savage. They were unable to grasp the direction of the profound chi fluctuations, and had no way of knowing if they had been swept. How were they going to enter Death God Castle? So from now onwards, all of you better be on high alert. Yiqing Luo's expression was grave as she squinted her eyes, reflecting a cold gaze. His gaze was like a sharp blade. It ruthlessly pierced into the hearts of more than 20 youths. It was so piercing that they swiftly shifted their gazes onto Yiqing Luo. At this moment, they must pick up their spirits and fully coordinate with Yiqing Luo's commands. Every hour, the scanning mechanism for chi fluctuations will rotate once. During the rotation of the direction, the fluctuation of the profound chi is in a static state. At this moment, it is our chance to enter Death God Castle. Yiqing Luo's charming eyes turned back as her slender little hand covered her chest. He could feel a ball of heat slowly spreading out from his heart. At the same time, her eyes were covered with a layer of misty luster. I saw it. The profound energy surrounding Death God Castle fluctuated. Perhaps it was because her heart had once nurtured an extremely talented profound heart jade. Even if that profound jade heart wasn't in her body, but Yiqing Luo seemed to have inherited the strength of that extremely strong profound jade heart. Through her profound heart jade, she could see all profound auras that were of a higher level than hers, and she could distinguish the level of a person's profound heart jade. Chapter 506. While the mechanism is rotating, Little Nine will use its current form to attract the other magical beast's attention. Yiqing Luo rubbed Little Nine on her shoulder and felt its mouth licking her palm before she continued, restrain all the sacred beast chi and try your best to disguise yourself as a little animal which has no attack power at all. Right, an animal and not a magical beast. A little animal without any attack power, even if it attracted the other magical beast's attention, if it ran away, these magical beasts and guards wouldn't chase after it forcefully. They would only treat it as a passing little animal. Little Nine licked her again. Yiqing Luo's eyes narrowed as she stared at the top of Death God Castle, at that moving mechanism. About half an incense's time later. Yi Qing Luo's body moved as her arms suddenly raised up. 20 over youngsters instantly congealed their senses. They were paying attention to Yi Qing Luo's hand gestures. Pay attention. Yi Qing Luo's lips curled into a hot-blooded smile. Following that, she shook her shoulders. Little Nine on her shoulder turned into a white lightning as it scurried out. Little Nine's action was extremely huge. It made those bundles of dense bushes rustle 100 miles away. Very quickly, it attracted the attention of 10 over magical beasts. Those magical beasts' eyes shone with a bloodthirsty glint as they leapt up and their 4 limbs pounced into the bushes. But this pounce was on thin air. The bushes in front started to move rapidly. The magical beasts instantly gave a loud and clear howl as 10 over of them pounced towards the direction of the sound. The magical beasts' howls attracted the guards' attention. 2 guards stayed behind while the rest dashed towards the direction where the magical beasts were pursuing. At the same time, Yi Qing Luo, who was hiding in the dark, was like a ghost as she silently dashed towards Death God Castle. The 20 over youngsters behind her were paying attention to Yi Qing Luo's actions. Although this was their first time taking action together. But it seemed as though they had practiced it countless of times. Under Yi Qing Luo's command, the youngsters abruptly got up and followed closely behind Yi Qing Luo. Although there were guards standing guard at the entrance, but their gazes were all placed on that team of guards and magical beasts. After all, Death God Castle's reputation was well known and there was a powerful profound chi fluctuation mechanism. Ever since the god thief had fallen here many years ago, there had been very few people who came to challenge Death God Castle. As time went by, the guards began to relax. Unexpectedly, just as their attention was completely placed on that patch of bushes, a group of over 20 people had already perfectly avoided the profound energy fluctuation mechanism and infiltrated Death God Castle. Immediately. Gather in the castle. Yi Qing Luo shouted coldly, reminding them. The tacit understanding between the 20 youths over the years made them feel no pressure at all. He quickly caught up with the brothers in front of him. When the last young man entered Death God Castle, the direction-changing mechanism coincidentally shifted once again. There was not a moment's difference. If he had been a step slower, the last youth would have been brutally cut off by the mechanism of the profound chi fluctuation. The direction which Yi Qing Luo had chosen was the side door which was drawn on the map. This was the canteen where the guards of Death God Castle ate. Apart from mealtimes, there were usually no guards here. It was the safest. After the group of people entered Death God Castle, they instantly felt as if their entire bodies were enveloped by a wave of yin qi. It was indeed Death God Castle, every place was filled with death energy. Yi Qing Luo sized up the surroundings. The interior of Death God Castle was dimly lit, rendering the surroundings even more strange and terrifying. Turn left and go upstairs, the exquisite pagoda is in the 3rd room. Chapter 507. It sounded like it was just a short distance of a few steps. The 20 or so youths could not help but heave a sigh of relief. But Yi Qing Luo, who had seen the map, was very clear that this wasn't just a simple left turn up the stairs. The entire Death God Castle was as big as the entire palace. Perhaps it was even bigger than the Imperial Palace. Furthermore, there were all sorts of mechanisms and formations hidden in every corner of the room. It could be said that every step he took was equivalent to a choice between life and death. The interior of Death God Castle was not as strict as the outside. Yi Qing Luo led 20 over brothers and walked out of the canteen first. He extended his head and scanned the area with his perception. As there are too many mechanisms and formations in Death God Castle, there are only 2 teams of internal guards. They will search the surroundings every 2 hours and each round will take at least an hour. In other words, as long as we react quickly enough, these guards won't pose any threat to us. After Yi Qing Luo finished her words, she swept a glance behind her, at those youngsters who were concentrating on listening to her. She saw that after hearing her words, they all revealed expressions of relief. Yi Qing Luo's lips curled upwards as she sneered, "Do you know the reason why there are only 2 teams of guards in Death God Castle and every round of search takes such a long time?" The hearts of the youths that had just relaxed immediately tensed up. Yi Qing Luo's smile was simply too terrifying. Especially in this kind of atmosphere, it made them feel an inexplicable heavy pressure on their shoulders. An unknown fear grew and spread from the bottom of their hearts. The scariest thing about Death God Castle is the mechanisms and formations that are everywhere. After leaving the canteen, every step you take could possibly trigger a certain mechanism or step into a certain formation. Once you touch these formations and mechanisms, you will die. Yi Qing Luo suppressed her voice to a very low and deep level. In this strange atmosphere, it seemed extremely eerie. Among the 20 or so youths, the oldest was only 18 years old and had yet to truly experience life and death. Upon hearing about these formations and mechanisms, they were all shocked. Their bodies stiffened, and they felt their hands and feet go cold. Scared, very scared. But under such a fearful situation, these youths actually felt an extremely unfamiliar pleasure. Yes, pleasure. The blood in his body was constantly boiling. The fear in his heart and the burning excitement in his blood fused together, forming an unfamiliar pleasure. Their hands and feet were itching, and they had the urge to flex their muscles. These youths did not forget their purpose of coming here. They wanted to become stronger and gain more battle experience. At this moment, this fear of the unknown meant that every step they took represented a dangerous place. It made them afraid, but at the same time, it gave them the thrill of a challenge. What Yi Qing Luo wanted was to provoke this feeling in them. Everything needed passion in order to be completed perfectly. What these youths wanted was a passion to become stronger. The cold smile on Yi Qing Luo's lips gradually turned into a gratified smile. From now onwards, watch my every step and don't touch anything in the surroundings. All of you just have to remember, our target is the exquisite pagoda. As for other things, no matter how much you like them, do not touch them easily. There were many things here. Once touched, they would become mechanisms. The youths' faces were filled with determination, and they replied calmly, yes. Yi Qing Luo's gaze scanned the surroundings vigilantly, and upon realizing that there weren't any traces of guards, she then left the canteen in a flash. Chapter 508. All the mechanisms and arrays on the map were imprinted in Yi Qing Luo's mind. Based on her super-strong memory and judgment, Yi Qing Luo's actions were swift as she nimbly avoided everything as she sped forward. Those 20-over youngsters behind her didn't dare to be distracted. They had a tacit understanding, and with just a glance or a gesture, they were able to understand each other's meaning. Because of that, the entire journey up to the second floor was safe. The second floor was a square-shaped long corridor which encircled a circle of rooms with similar designs. Every single room was filled with numerous rare treasures. Every single item would cause many cultivators to fight over it. Yi Qing Luo's target was the third room. She searched for the mechanisms and arrays in her mind as she said solemnly, there are a total of 14 rooms on the second floor, and the treasures are more valuable than the first floor. Because of that, the mechanisms and arrays here are much more concentrated than the first floor. The crowd took a deep breath as they didn't dare to be careless. The path to the third room wasn't far, but this path was filled with arrays. The first floor was filled with mechanisms while the second floor was filled with arrays. The walls, floor, and the design of the room were all god-trapping arrays of the 5 elements and 8 trigrams. If it wasn't for those who knew about arrays, they would definitely be trapped to death on the second floor, unable to leave this place until death befalls them. Yi Qing Luo suddenly stopped as she flipped her palm. A feather fan slid into her palm. Her fingertips moved slightly as though she was hooking something. The youngsters only felt a flash of silver light and saw a piece of iron wire flying up as it speedily wound itself around the wooden pillar on the roof. Yi Qing Luo's fingers moved as that iron wire stretched taut. Yi Qing Luo flipped over and climbed up along the iron wire. 20-over youngsters followed one after another as they grabbed onto that iron wire as they climbed up the roof. Their movements were extremely light. The clothes which Yan Xiaoyi specially chose for them were extremely precious, so there wasn't any friction sound at all. The group of them bent down like geckos as they clung onto the roof. Heading towards the third room, the entire path is filled with arrays. Especially the first room's entrance, it's an illusion array. Yi Qing Luo lowered her eyes as she glanced downwards at that door, which looked no different from any other ordinary ground. Actually, the tightly shut pattern in the first room was the summoning totem of the illusion array. If she walked through the first room, she would sink into the swamp and never be able to climb out. Because of this, Yi Qing Luo chose to climb up from the eaves. Under such a tense and strange atmosphere, the youths broke out in cold sweat, and even their palms were sweating. He kept climbing high up in the sky and kept moving forward. The teenagers were afraid that they would delay the brothers behind them and would not be able to catch up with the team in time, so they did not dare to stop for even a moment. After a long time, the youths only felt that their palms were slippery, as if they would fall from the eaves at any time. Most importantly, the iron wire installed in Yi Qing Luo's feather fan was to make use of the iron wire to take someone's life. The forging of the iron wire was extremely sharp. The palms of the youths with slightly more tender skin were cut open, and blood seeped out. Yi Qing Luo had lost count of the number of times she had been forced to do it for such a long period of time, so she was long used to it. However, the youths behind him had never gone through any training in high-altitude climbing. They had a lot of endurance, but the sharpness of the iron wire was too much for them to bear. The youngsters clenched their teeth as they looked at the third room, which was just a few feet away, as they forced themselves to climb. When they passed by the second room, before Yi Qing Luo could even say a word, that tightly shut door inexplicably blew a strong gust of wind. That strong wind blew against their faces, bringing along a scorching heat. It was as though a ball of raging fire was pouncing towards them. Chapter 509. The youngsters' faces were filled with panic. All of them stretched out their hands in an attempt to grab hold of that young man. But the heat which pounced towards them was getting higher and higher, so much so that they couldn't open their eyes. That young man who had fallen down was about to scream out in terror. But he knew that the minute he screamed out, his bunch of brothers would be discovered. He suppressed the terror in his heart as his gaze swiftly swept past the surroundings. Both his feet had already landed on the ground. No. This wasn't the ground. He saw with his own eyes that his legs seemed to be stuck in the ground, sinking downwards. This illusion array. The second room's ground was also an illusion array. This wasn't the ground, but another space which was connected by an array. Swamp land. Being trapped in the swamp land was equivalent to being buried alive. The young man's eyes opened wide as his heart was filled with terror and unwillingness to die just like that. He speedily tried to find a way to save himself. Suddenly, a silver light flashed past his eyes. The young man speedily stretched out his hand to grab that silver light, not caring about his cut hands as he speedily climbed upwards. His speed was slow, and after sinking into the swamp, his naked eye couldn't see anything on his body. But he could actually feel that both his legs were wrapped up by numerous silt. He used all his might to climb upwards. His entire body's energy was gradually depleted. His forehead was filled with sweat and his body was getting heavier. Even a slight movement upwards felt like 1,000 caddies. The second room was still spitting out hot air. That gush of hot air made the young man's eyes filled with a thick layer of sweat. A sense of helplessness made the young man have the thought of giving up. He tried his best to raise his head as he looked at his brothers above him. This look met with a pair of dazzling eyes which were like the stars. That pair of eyes seemed to contain countless beliefs. She stared at him without blinking, her eyes filled with encouragement. The young man even saw her pink lips opening and closing, silently spitting out 2 words, all the best. It was Yi Qing Luo. It was their Madame Qing Luo. This iron wire was sent over by Yi Qing Luo. She held the iron wire on the eaves in one hand and the feather fan in the other. At the end of the feather fan, a piece of iron wire was pulled out. She was a lady, a delicate and petite lady. But it was a hand which supported a robust young man like him. The young man's heart was violently shaken. Yi Qing Luo obviously had the chance to directly use the iron wire to coil around his waist, pulling the young man into the iron wire. But she only gave him a chance to live, and let him work hard for his own survival. Within the youth's body, an uncontrollable profound energy suddenly surged, unceasingly battering against the profound jade heart. His eyes became extremely resolute. His breathing became smoother. His legs also became lighter. Taking advantage of this feeling, he used all 4 limbs and quickly climbed up the iron wire to the eaves. In his chest, a burning sensation kept surging. The youth's breathing was rapid and hot. Yiqing Luo's hand was placed on the young man's shoulder. That soft little hand seemed to contain some kind of power. He forcefully suppressed the burning agitation in his chest. If I advance, my profound energy will leak out and attract the attention of the guards. Yiqing Luo transmitted a message into the mercenary group's badge. First, store all the advancement energy into the profound jade heart. Promotion? The other youths gripped tightly onto the iron wire in disbelief. Thousands of F*CKU horses began to roar in their hearts. This could also be promoted? What the? One Ni Roa Pan who ran to advance was already heaven-defying enough. Now there was another one who climbed the iron wire to advance. Chapter 5:10. The young man followed Yiqing Luo's method as he guided the raging profound qi in his body to store it into his profound heart jade. 20 over youngsters hung in mid-air without urging him as they quietly stared at that young man storing his profound qi. The youngsters' palms were already cut by the iron wire as the air was filled with a faint stench of blood. Their hands were also feeling weak. But not a single one of them showed an impatient expression. On the contrary, a surge of lofty sentiments arose in their hearts. Indeed, Yiqing Luo was filled with endless hope. Even bringing hope to the people around her. The youngsters naturally could tell that Yiqing Luo could obviously save their brothers directly and speedily moved to the 3rd room to avoid the 2nd room's heat wave. But Yiqing Luo only gave them a chance to live. At the same time when she gave them this chance, Yiqing Luo also passed her own life into that young man's hands. If the young man's reaction wasn't fast enough, or if he didn't have a strong and unyielding conviction, and eventually fell into the illusion array, then Yiqing Luo who was supporting him would also fall into danger. There was a possibility that she might be implicated by him and fall down. Yiqing Luo trusted them. Just like how they trusted Yiqing Luo. The youngsters' gazes towards Yiqing Luo were filled with a sense of reverence. She had always been using her own way to train them, making them become stronger. Their ears seemed to be lingering with the words that Yiqing Luo once said. That unique cold yet elegant voice spoke in a sonorous and forceful tone. The world group will become the #1 mercenary group in the future. Do you have this confidence? Yes. Of course they had this confidence. With a leader like her, the #1 mercenary group was bound to become the winner. The young man had already suppressed the restlessness of his profound qi as he took the lead to climb towards the 3rd room. His actions were nimble and all the discomfort had been thrown behind him. This was the body which had been impacted by the profound qi. The meridians in his body had all been opened and the endless profound qi in his body seemed to be inexhaustible. Looking at the young man's actions, those youngsters behind were getting more and more excited. Presumably, this trip to Death God Castle would allow them to obtain a good upgrade. Even if they were unable to upgrade their profound grade, but the upgrade of their mental state was even more valuable. More than 20 people, enduring the heat wave from the 2nd room, shuffled to the 3rd room. That was their destination. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes as she swept a glance at the surroundings, instructing the youngsters to stabilize their actions. Immediately thereafter, the feather fan flipped through the air, and another iron wire shot forth, wrapping itself around the eaves of the door to the 3rd room. Like a nimble elf, she followed the iron wire and quickly climbed onto the eaves of the door. Her legs hooked onto the beam, and her body hung upside down in midair, falling straight down. When the youngsters saw Yiqing Luo's shocking action, they were so shocked that they almost cried out. Yiqing Luo's actions were simply too dangerous. When Yiqing Luo hung down, her face was facing the direction of the main door. Yiqing Luo swiftly took out 2 silver hairpins from the hair band fixed at the back of her head. One of the silver hairpins stabbed into the crack of the door, while the other flew out and hit the corner of the room. The youths were puzzled. They had been concentrating their attention on Yiqing Luo's movements. However, there was clearly nothing in the direction of the silver hairpin. Could it be that Yiqing Luo had missed? If this deviation triggered the mechanism, this thought had just flashed through his mind. Chapter 5:11. Densely packed worms, crawling worms. The silver hairpin was instantly covered by those worms as it covered the entire ground. The youngsters then realized. The place where Yiqing Luo's silver hairpin had shot was a palm-sized worm cocoon. That worm cocoon was connected to a silver thread which they couldn't see earlier. The place where the silver thread was connected to was the place where Yiqing Luo had used the other silver hairpin to poke into the door slit. If they pushed open this room door under the situation where they couldn't see it with their naked eyes. Under the influence of the silver thread, the worm cocoon would split open and in an instant. It would be covered by these worms. The minute they thought of these worms crawling all over them, the youngsters started to have goosebumps. The range of these worms' activity was limited to the vicinity of the third room and didn't cross over to the second or fourth room's entrance. It could be seen that between the rooms, there was an invisible array which separated the rooms. When Yiqing Luo saw the overwhelming number of worms, her scalp couldn't help but turn numb. It was simply too creepy. Looking at the palm-sized worm cocoon, it could actually crawl out thousands upon thousands of worms. The third room's entrance and railings were considered spacious, at least able to accommodate 10 over adults standing. But these worms, after they covered the entire ground, as both sides were obstructed by the array, the worms were squeezed into this area and started to squirm one by one. There was a tendency to surge upwards. Originally, on seeing these worms not being able to climb up the wooden pillars, the youngsters who were hanging in mid-air heaved a sigh of relief, were now so frightened that their faces turned pale. What would happen if these worms surged upwards? If they surged to the highest point, they would directly climb onto them. The youngsters' scalps turned numb as they didn't dare to imagine that scenario. What they were more worried about was Yiqing Luo, who was hanging upside down at the entrance. She was the closest to the ground, unlike them who were on the roof. Those worms piled up higher and higher and had already overflowed the silver thread. The hanging Yiqing Luo was just a fist's distance away. When the youngsters saw this, their hearts were extremely anxious. All of them bit their lower lips tightly, suppressing their screams which were about to burst out. Standing right in front, the youngster who was saved by Yiqing Luo earlier had a pale face as a ball of fire burned in his pupils. He released the iron thread with one hand and was about to charge towards Yiqing Luo. He was prepared to fight for a little more time for Yiqing Luo. Let these worms swallow him up first. Just as he was about to jump down, the young man behind him pulled him back. Look! 20 over youngsters saw Yiqing Luo standing upside down, her fingertips pressing against the silver hairpin which was inserted into the door slit. The red feather fan in his other hand spread open. Like a leaping flame, it bloomed in her palm. As his fingertips moved, the feather fan shot out densely packed iron wires. These iron wires instantly pierced into the swarm of worms. The iron wire was so sharp that it easily cut countless insects into halves. However, they couldn't handle the sheer number of bugs. Every time one wave died, another wave would follow the thread and climb up. The end of the iron wire was the feather fan in Yiqing Luo's hands. Placing these iron wires down was simply giving these worms a chance to devour Yiqing Luo. But what made the youngsters astonished was that the insects didn't attack like Yiqing Luo. Those bugs were moving at an extremely fast speed towards the iron wire that was inserted into the silver hairpin's door slit. Once the bugs climbed onto the silver hairpin, they suddenly disappeared without a trace. The youngsters were all dumbstruck. It was until those densely packed worms had completely disappeared, leaving behind the ground which was filled with worm corpses which were cut into two halves by the iron wire when they were suddenly enlightened. Chapter 5:12. In the boundary of the area where the insects were crawling, numerous iron wires formed into the shape of a talisman. Even those youngsters who didn't know much about arrays could tell that this was a type of array. And this was the array which lured these insects into the array. Yiqing Luo flipped down and landed stably on the ground. Her 5 fingers plucked that silver hairpin out directly. The room's door opened silently. It was settled just like that? They had reached their destination and were able to get the exquisite pagoda? However, when Yiqing Luo saw the open door, her expression wasn't as joyful and relaxed as expected. Instead, it was extremely grave. Come down. Yiqing Luo opened her mouth calmly as her voice sounded a little tensed. The youngsters' hearts were lifted once again. Could it be that there was an even more terrifying array in the room? One after another, they landed softly on the ground from where the iron wires were hanging. When they stepped onto the thick floor, the youngsters then heaved a sigh of relief as they felt as though their lives had been saved. Yiqing Luo threw that silver hairpin in her hand to that youngster who had almost fallen into the illusion array. All the insects are sealed in the silver hairpin and I'll leave it to you for safekeeping. Who knows, it might become our help. Hearing that it was insects, the youngsters couldn't help but shuddered. The dense swarm of insects just now had truly frightened them. The youngster kept the silver hairpin into his sleeve expressionlessly. Don't be in a hurry to relax. Yiqing Luo's lips curled slightly as her vision returned to the open room. When the youngsters' gazes turned over, the sigh of relief that they had let out was completely stuck in their throats. It was really a life for every step they took. They had just settled the cocoon array and immediately following that, there was another terrifying mechanism waiting for them. They saw in the third room, there were 4 racks with various kinds of rare treasures placed on them. A huge luminous pearl illuminated the entire room, making it exceptionally bright. In the middle of the rack was an empty path. What made the youngsters shocked was that this empty path which allowed one to walk on was filled with densely packed blue light rays, as it kept on sweeping. Although they didn't understand what these blue light rays represented. But they knew that these light rays were some kind of mechanism. Possibly, it was similar to the profound chi fluctuation mechanism at the outer area of Death God Castle. Yiqing Luo's brows sunk as her eyes squinted, seriously sizing up these blue rays. The exquisite pagoda was in the third room and Dmo Xian had simply indicated that there was a profound chi fluctuation scanning mechanism installed in the room, similar to the one outside Death God Castle. This could be considered as a modern infrared ray. In this era, there were actually people who used profound chi to create infrared mechanisms. He didn't know who was the one who designed the arrays and mechanisms in Death God Castle, it was simply godly. When she was once the reclusive patriarch, Yiqing Luo had received plenty of infrared training. Although, these were somewhat similar to infrared rays. However, it was still no match for modern technology. Yiqing Luo glanced sideways. Pay attention to the time the guards search, I'll take a look at the density of these light rays. There were more than 20 of them. Although the lighting in Death God Castle was dim, if the guards came searching, they would be too big of a target and would be easily discovered. The youths stood guard, paying attention to their surroundings. They did not dare to move, for fear of triggering some other mechanism. Yiqing Luo congealed her senses and placed her attention on the blue light. Lying on the ground, she narrowed her eyes and carefully calculated the frequency and density of the light rays. Chapter 5:13. These people, Yiqing Luo had already treated them as her own people from the bottom of her heart. She had no intention to conceal her own set of footwork. If these brothers were able to learn this set of footwork, it would be beneficial to the world group's development. But how much they could comprehend would depend on themselves. Yiqing Luo's gaze turned calm as her expression congealed as she spoke word by word. Take note, all the items on the rack, remember not to touch them carelessly. If you slightly move it, it will trigger the array to be activated. When the youngsters heard that, their expressions turned solemn as they nodded their heads. Seeing the entire room filled with rare treasures, these youngsters were indeed tempted. But no matter how rare the treasures were, it wasn't as important as everyone's lives, or their own lives. Along the way, they had seen quite a number of mechanisms and arrays, and there were several times where they almost lost their lives. Watch carefully. Yiqing Luo's voice was mellow as it was transmitted into the youngsters' ears from the mercenary group badge. It was as if something had struck their hearts. 20 over pairs of eyes were all fixed onto Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo's actions were swift as she displayed her footwork, agilely avoiding one after another blue light rays. That nimble figure was like a lady dancing in the light rays. Her posture was enchanting, making one's heart palpitate. From the moment she entered the room, to avoiding the blue light rays and arriving at the inner part of the room, the time Yiqing Luo used was not more than 10 breaths. The speed was so fast that it made one tongue-tied. The youngsters were shocked by Yiqing Luo's speed. That footwork was strange like a shadow, precisely avoiding every single light ray. By the time they regained their senses, Yiqing Luo was already standing opposite them as a pair of encouraging eyes gazed deeply at them through the blue light rays. "Next, who's up?" Yiqing Luo's cold voice was heard from the mercenary group badge. 20 over youngsters looked at each other in dismay. Their hearts thumped hard. This was too fast. How was it possible for them to memorize that strange footwork which Yiqing Luo displayed after just one look? How could they possibly remember her movements to avoid those blue light rays? Suddenly, a figure stood out. It was Imo Han Shang. He raised his arm, indicating that he could try first. Yiqing Luo's lips curled into an encouraging smile as she nodded, "I'll wait for you here." Towards Imo Han Shang, she didn't really understand him. Yiqing Luo wasn't clear about his ability. However, as the young master of the mercenary guild, his prestige in the mercenary guild was quite high. He must not be an ordinary person. As for why Imo Han Shang didn't hesitate to offend the Yuchi family, appearing to stand up for her, and even taking the initiative to join the mercenary group to build momentum for the world group, Yiqing Luo still couldn't figure it out. No one would help a person for no reason. Perhaps, Imo Han Shang had some motives. But Yiqing Luo's intuition told her that even if Imo Han Shang had an ulterior motive, he would not hurt the world group. Imo Han Shang twisted his neck as he took out a piece of black cloth from his sleeve, learning from Yiqing Luo to wrap his hair tightly, not leaving a single strand of hair. Even a strand of hair could brush past the blue light. When Imo Han Shang's feet stepped into the room, that delicate face was filled with seriousness and solemnity. That pair of slightly raised red phoenix eyes narrowed slightly, emitting an invisible cold and sharp glint. He bent down, and his slender body quickly entered the blue light. Seeing Imo Han Shang's actions, Yiqing Luo was shocked. His footwork and the position he stepped on were basically the same as hers. Moreover, the speed and rhythm were controlled just right. Chapter 5:14. This Imo Han Shang indeed had extraordinary ability. His memory had also exceeded Yiqing Luo's imagination. Luckily, this extraordinary young man had entered the world group, becoming their brother. "Don't relax, pay attention to the front, your right side. Well done, the last line of defense." That cold voice was extremely decisive. Imo Han Shang was extremely cooperative. Imo Han Shang successfully reached Yiqing Luo's side. Looking at the sweat on the young man's forehead, that handsome face revealed a relieved smile. Yiqing Luo walked over and patted his shoulder lightly to show encouragement. "You've done very well, but I'm a little curious. What were you mumbling about earlier?" Imo Han Shang was slightly astonished. As though he had not expected Yiqing Luo to notice these small details. His cheeks blushed slightly as he scratched his head in embarrassment. "Your footwork is very strange and your speed is extremely fast. I need to use the interval between breaths to determine when you take your next step." The youngsters opposite were suddenly enlightened. No wonder Imo Han Shang was able to replicate Yiqing Luo's actions so swiftly. They thought that Imo Han Shang also knew how to calculate the frequency of these blue light rays. Why hadn't they thought of this idea? Yiqing Luo nodded her head as though she was deep in thought. This was indeed a good idea. Imo Han Shang was able to remember every single action and every single step she took, and at the same time, he was able to calculate the frequency and magnitude of every single action. He was really a talent. "Everyone's breathing frequency is different, so I'm afraid my calculation method isn't suitable for you," Imo Han Shang said in slight embarrassment. The blue light rays frequency was the same. But everyone's breathing frequency was different. If they followed Emo Han Shang's breathing frequency to barge through the blue light rays, they would be easily swept by the blue light rays. After staying silent for a long time, Yiqing Luo looked towards the youngsters opposite her once again. The third one, come over if you're confident. Xiao Jin and Yan Xiaoyi took a step forward at the same time. Realizing that someone had stood out at the same time as them, the two of them stared at each other and immediately retreated back into the group. These two really had a tacit understanding. Yan Xiaoyi pursed her lips as she gave a light harumph, pointing at herself and pointing at the blue light rays, indicating that she would go first. Xiao Jin shrugged his shoulders. Yan Xiaoyi stretched her tendons and rolled on the ground, drilling into the blue light rays. Yan Xiaoyi tried her best to replicate Yiqing Luo's actions. Although the process was a little thrilling, but under Yiqing Luo's timely reminder, it was still a daunting experience without any danger. After Yan Xiaoyi, the next one was Xiao Jin. These youngsters had learned to be smart. Directly making use of Mo Han Shang's breathing memory method, he directly found the rhythm of the brothers who had passed through the blue light rays. Only two youngsters were too anxious and their skin was cut by the blue light rays. Only two youths were too nervous and their skin was cut by the light. Fortunately, they reacted in time and didn't cause a disaster. Yi Yezi said. Yi, long Yi. Yi, they seemed to have reached the end of the room, but in fact, every room here had a special secret room. Mu Yi. Yiqing Luo said. He, the King Master. The Wu of the Han Shang, the Chen. Chen Tian, Yi Chen Yi, Chen, death to Chen Long, Chen Wu was Qing. Had long God Yiqing Luo said. Chapter 5:15. Yiqing Luo gazed at the wall for some time and suddenly stretched out her hand as she placed it on a certain spot. The wall seemed to have caved in. The walls quickly moved to the left and right. A passage to a secret chamber appeared before everyone's eyes. At a glance, the secret room was pitch black. The youngsters were still in shock. There was a secret room under the mechanism, so no one noticed that Yiqing Luo's expression suddenly turned grave and solemn. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes as her eyes were filled with astonishment. She wasn't seeing things, right? Just now, when the door to the secret room was opened, she seemed to have seen the corner of a robe quickly disappear into the darkness. Someone had arrived here before them? Impossible. This thought had just flashed past her mind when Yiqing Luo immediately dispelled this guess. She had totally relied on the detailed map that Dmo Xian had given her, before she was able to lead her gang of brothers to arrive here safely. Someone else would arrive before her? Wait a minute, could it be Yuqi Peng? In order to prevent them from completing the mission, in order to wait for them to give up on the mission, Yuqi Peng immediately accepted the mission. He might have borrowed the power of the dark forces to come here. After all, Yuqi Peng was overly confident in his mission to infiltrate Death God Castle and steal the exquisite pagoda. If it was Yuqi Peng, it wasn't impossible. Yiqing Luo's heart was filled with thoughts and guesses as she sorted them out one by one. No matter who was the one who barged into the secret room before them, this meant that the world group's actions had been exposed. It was very likely that there would be a fierce battle to be fought. She had to find out who that person was. If it affected the training of these youths and caused the guards of Death God Castle to find out, none of them could leave this place alive. Thinking of this, Yiqing Luo withdrew all the complicated thoughts in her heart. He took out the map that he had hidden in his chest like a treasure. She stuffed the map into Yan Xiaoyi's hands and with the illumination of the luminous pearl, she pointed out their current location to Yan Xiaoyi. You guys take the map and find the exquisite pagoda, I'm going to investigate something. The youths looked at her with puzzled gazes. Mercenary Group Badge Sound Transmission. I've activated the authority of the executive leader and Xiaoyi. You guys listen to her commands. If there are any accidents, directly send me a sound transmission through the badge. Yi Qing Luo didn't explain further. If she were to tell them that someone had entered the secret room before them, they would not be able to escape. It was bound to cause panic among the youths. It would also affect the progress of completing the mission. Yi Qing Luo stepped into the secret room and quickly disappeared into the darkness. Yan Xiaoyi and Xiao Jin couldn't stop him in time. After entering the secret tunnel, Yi Qing Luo was completely certain that other than them, there were other people in the secret tunnel. She could faintly sense an extremely unfamiliar profound energy fluctuation. Yi Qing Luo's slender brows creased tightly as she speedily headed towards the direction of that fluctuation. The secret chamber was full of twists and turns, with countless paths leading in different directions. Dmo Xian only marked one direction, which was the direction towards the exquisite pagoda. As for the fluctuation of the profound energy, it was clearly coming from the opposite direction. Could it be, it wasn't Yu Qipeng? Who could it be? Other thieves who snuck into Death God Castle to steal? Yi Qing Luo's footsteps halted. If it were any other thief, as long as their target wasn't the same thing, then they wouldn't have anything to do with each other. There was no need for her to meddle in this matter. Didn't that person leave immediately after seeing them open the secret chamber? It was enough to tell that the other party didn't want to clash with them. Since that was the case, there was no need for her to chase after the other party. Yi Qing Luo turned back and was preparing to head towards the path towards the exquisite pagoda. Chapter 5:16. Yi Qing Luo's body continued to sink. A strong gust of Yin wind blew, sucking her down. Yi Qing Luo concentrated and swiftly gathered the profound qi into her limbs and bones. Her body suddenly became light as a feather. His feet landed firmly on the ground. What was going on? She had just walked through this secret passage and did not trigger any mechanisms at all. How could he have missed a step? What was this place? Yi Qing Luo surveyed the surroundings. At this moment, she was in a huge prison cell. That's right, a prison cell. The air was filled with a thick stench that was extremely pungent. The surroundings were dark, with only a few torches on the stone walls illuminating the place. The flames flickered, and the shadows of the flames swayed. Pingsheng added a weird atmosphere to this dungeon. Yi Qing Luo's brows creased slightly as astonishment flashed past her heart. There was actually a dungeon under the mechanisms of Death God Castle? This dungeon was clearly quite old. The smell was a little too strong. Apart from the fishy stench, there was also a faint smell of blood mixed with it. Suddenly, Yi Qing Luo's expression changed slightly as her ears twitched sensitively and an inexplicable chill ran down her spine. She heard a series of orderly footsteps. Yi Qing Luo swept a glance at the surroundings and it was filled with prison cells, with no place to hide. The footsteps were getting closer and closer. Based on the sound of footsteps, there were at least 10 people. Their steps were orderly, and the strength of their steps on the ground was also uniform. They were probably the guards of this dungeon. On the map drawn by Dmo Xian, there was no indication of the dungeon. Dmo Xian should not have been here before. Towards everything that happened here, Yi Qing Luo knew nothing, so she must not let these guards discover her. This gigantic dungeon, which was hidden under the Death God Castle, was too mysterious and strange. Yi Qing Luo's body was light as she moved slowly. He quickly moved to the cell closest to her. The cell was tightly locked. It was pitch black and quiet inside. The flickering light from the fire couldn't reach the inside of the cell at all. Yi Qing Luo used her spiritual consciousness to sense the surroundings, but there was no sign of life in the prison. It should be an empty cell. Yi Qing Luo decisively decided that this prison cell was the best choice. She closed her eyes and silently chanted the secret incantation. Her figure swayed as she executed her blink movement and entered the prison cell. There were quite a lot of straw in the prison cell, and when she stepped on it, it was soft, giving off a rustling sound. Yi Qing Luo was worried that the team of guards would hear her, so she didn't dare to move recklessly. He shrunk his body into a corner and quietly pulled over a pile of straw to cover himself. Shortly after, he concealed his aura. Yi Qing Luo's thoughts were all on the guards outside, so she didn't notice that in the darkness, a pair of sparkling eyes was staring at her without blinking. The pupils were filled with astonishment and astonishment. Gradually, it turned into a meaningful and profound meaning. Not of, and Qing Luo. Qing Luo said, long of the light. Ling. Qing Luo said, ling Luo, she said. Through the straw, Yi Qing Luo saw 10 over-prison guards dressed in green long robes, with large swords hanging on their waists, walking past in an orderly manner. The 2 guards walked past the prison cell and 10 over pairs of eyes swept past the prison cell in an orderly manner. When these guards passed by the prison cell, a dozen pairs of eyes swept across the cell in unison. When these guards saw the prison cell that Yi Qing Luo was hiding in, they suddenly stopped in their tracks. Through the gaps of the straw, Yi Qing Luo saw those 10 over pairs of eyes, staring straight at the direction where she was hiding. Chapter 5:17. She had been discovered? Yi Qing Luo's heart thumped hard. She had obviously concealed her presence completely. Were these underground prison guards so resourceful? Just as she was concentrating, preparing to execute her blink movement to leave the prison cell before these guards came over to capture her. The underground prison guards who were standing outside for several breaths turned around in unison and continued to patrol in front. Yi Qing Luo. What the hell was going on? Had they discovered her or not? The footsteps of that group of guards gradually went further away. Yi Qing Luo noticed that other than the time they stopped at her cell door for several breaths, they had just casually swept past the other cells. This made Yi Qing Luo feel even more strange. Gradually, the underground prison fell into darkness and silence once again. There were no more footsteps from those guards. The entire underground prison was so silent that it was a little strange. After staying in the prison for so long, Yi Qing Luo was more or less immune to this pungent stench. Especially after she hid behind this pile of straw, that pungent stench became even more intense. As time went by, she got used to it. As the underground prison guards were standing at the entrance for several breaths' time, Yi Qing Luo had been nesting under the straw for some time before she moved her 4 limbs. She had just moved when she heard a hoarse ear-piercing voice. It's actually a young lady. He. That hoarse laughter was extremely ear-piercing. It made one's hair stand on end. Yi Qing Luo's pupils suddenly contracted. This voice was right beside her. There was someone beside her and she actually didn't realize it. Yi Qing Luo's brows creased in alarm as she speedily pushed the straw aside and rolled on the ground. After she was far away from that direction, she congealed her gaze towards the direction of the voice as she suppressed her voice. Who is it? You're rather agile, no wonder you're able to walk till here. That voice continued, indeed the times have changed. It's only been a few years and a lady can also become an outstanding thief. Hearing this emotional voice and words, Yi Qing Luo's tightly knitted brows loosened slightly. This voice was very old and belonged to a man. Perhaps it was because his throat was dry, it sounded a little hoarse. This old man didn't have any ill intentions. Yi Qing Luo narrowed her eyes as she carefully sized up the old man who was sitting beside her. This old man, just who was he? Before she teleported in, she had specially sensed this prison cell, and there was no sound at all. Moreover, she had been lying in the pile of straw for at least half an hour. She did not notice anyone beside her at all. If not for the old man's words, she probably wouldn't have realized it. Little girl, there's no need to treat me like a scourge. The elderly saw Yi Qing Luo's eyes filled with vigilance as he burst out laughing. I'm trapped by the profound ice shackles and can't move at all. Profound ice chains? Yi Qing Luo had heard of this before. It was rumored that the spiritual energy of heaven and earth had been gathered to form the indestructible ice as its material, and it was forged by the number 1 blacksmith. Those who were chained by the profound ice shackles, no matter how high their profound rank was, no matter how strong they were, they would not be able to break free. Old man, who are you? Yi Qing Luo got closer and pushed aside the straw. He saw an old man dressed in ragged clothes, his hands fixed to the wall. The chains that fixed him in place glowed with a cold light. They were indeed profound ice chains. A person who needed the profound ice chains to restrain was absolutely not to be belittled. Yiqing Luo absolutely believed that this old man's ability. Not only was it above her, it was extremely powerful. Otherwise, based on her acute sense, how could she possibly not discover that there was someone beside her? Chapter 5:18. So. Earlier those dungeon guards weren't looking at her but this old man? Yiqing Luo was rather curious about who were the people locked up in this dungeon. She placed her vision back onto the old man as she sized him up carefully. The old man looked extremely disheveled. Under the dim light, the old man's clothes were tattered and there were blood scabs on it. His withered yellow hair was in a mess, looking like a bird's nest as each strand was knotted. The old man was covered in filth and that face was so black that she couldn't tell what he looked like originally. Yiqing Luo suddenly recalled the old man's emotional few years as the corners of her eyes twitched. He couldn't have been locked up here for so many years and had not taken a bath right. Who I am isn't important. What's important is, young lady, if you fall into this place, you'll be the same as me, trapped here. Although the old man was covered in filth and his entire face was black, but only that pair of crystal clear eyes was exceptionally bright. What kind of enemy is this? Yiqing Luo didn't doubt the old man's words. The old man obviously didn't look like an ordinary person but he was still imprisoned here by the profound ice shackles. She didn't feel that she could escape easily. But the meaning behind the old man's words represented that he knew what this place was. The old man shook his head and that chicken nest-like hair floated down a pile of powdery dirt. Young lady, even if you know where this place is, there's no way you can escape. That might not be the case. Yiqing Luo's brows rose. She wouldn't easily come to a conclusion on something that she hadn't tried. The old man squinted his eyes as his lips curled into a faint smile. Looks like young lady is very confident actually wanting to leave this place isn't impossible. His smile made Yiqing Luo's back abruptly turn chilly. Yiqing Luo's eyes twitched as she hugged her arms and rubbed them. You. Aren't you trying to say that if I save you, you'll bring me away? Smart. The old man nodded as the pile of dust on his head floated down like snowflakes. That pitch black and scabbed face was smiling into a ball. As expected. Yiqing Luo rolled her eyes as she couldn't be bothered with him. She directly turned around and walked towards the prison cell. Hey, little girl, you don't believe me? From the way you looked at me just now, I saw the word expert. You still don't believe me? Old man saw that Yiqing Luo didn't give him any face and wanted to leave the prison cell as he anxiously leaned forward. The profound ice chains crackled as they rubbed against each other. In the silent dungeon, the old man's voice and the sound of the profound ice chains were extremely clear. Yiqing Luo was so shocked that she stopped in her tracks. Damn it! Was this old man doing this on purpose? With such a loud noise, if those dungeon guards discovered them, neither of them would be able to escape. She turned her head and glared at the old man. I believe you. If you really had the ability to take me away, you wouldn't be trapped here now. The old man heaved a heavy sigh, his body softened, and hung heavily on the ice chains. Because of this, the chains let out a loud sound. I'd not expected that not only can a young lady become a thief, but she's also so intelligent. He muttered softly, shaking his head and sighing, I haven't understood the situation of the outside world for the past few years, so I can't even bluff people. Yiqing Luo. This old man, was he really an expert? Was he really an expert who needed to be trapped by the profound ice chains? Most elderly experts, weren't they all immortal-like, even if they were in a sorry state, there would still be an immortal air floating around them? This damn. Chapter 5:19. God thief. Can't you be a little more goddamn quiet? You keep mumbling to yourself all day long, pitter-patter. Can't you save some energy? A loud and clear voice broke the silence of the underground prison as it was heard speedily from afar. Yi Qing Luo could tell that the direction of the voice was 100 meters away from the underground prison. She shut her eyes and speedily constructed a map in her mind from the direction where the voice came from. That place should be the resting place of the underground prison guards. Wait. Wait a minute. Yi Qing Luo suddenly opened her eyes as a sliver of astonishment flashed past her eyes. Did she hear wrongly? That guard shouted, "God thief?" That god thief who had died in Death God Castle 10 years ago. It was said that 10 years ago, Nirvana Realm's #1 god thief had infiltrated Death God Castle to steal something and from then on disappeared from the world, disappearing into the legends. Many people said that God Thief had died in Death God Castle. God Thief's death also caused Death God Castle's reputation to soar. This amusing old man, who looked extremely unreliable, was actually God Thief? "I've been locked up by you for several years, not allowed to move or speak. Do you treat me as a dead man?" The old man spat out fiercely as he raised his voice and roared back. Perhaps it was because his throat was dry all year round, his roar was extremely ear-piercing. That guard didn't make any sound. Apparently he was already used to the old man's character. Yi Qing Luo's scalp turned numb from the shock. She dug her ears as a pair of half-squinted eyes gazed at the old man. This old man's character, why did she feel an inexplicable sense of familiarity? After the old man finished his roar, he suddenly coughed several times as that pair of bright eyes stared at Yi Qing Luo. "Young lady, your gaze. You're God Thief?" Yi Qing Luo directly interrupted the old man's words as she returned back to the front of the old man. The old man shook that chicken nest-like head as he clicked his tongue. "I've not expected a young lady like you to have heard of my name. Ha ha ha. Even though I've not been in the world for so many years, there are still legends about me." He really was God Thief. Why did this God Thief look a little silly? No wonder he was trapped here for 10 years. There are indeed legends about you. Yi Qing Luo blinked her eyes craftily, but this legend. It was all about how you fell in Death God Castle, the legend of a god thief turning into a coward. Pooey. The old man clenched his fists in agitation as he stared at Yi Qing Luo with a black face. "How could I be a coward? What Death God Castle? If it wasn't for that brat's tricks, would I be trapped here? It's a fact that you're trapped. Even if it's a scam and you've fallen for it, that's the other party's ability." Yi Qing Luo shrugged her shoulders as she turned a blind eye to God Thief's agitation. Stinking brat? Who was he referring to? Could it be the Castle Lord of Death God Castle? That doesn't seem likely. Death God Castle had existed for so many years, how could the Castle Lord possibly be a stinking brat? No matter what, he should be an old man. However, the little brat, who was able to trick the holy thief of a generation, did indeed have some skills. Yi Qing Luo looked at the infuriated old man who was stomping his feet. If it wasn't for the fact that he was trapped by the profound ice shackles, he would probably fly into a rage, as she snickered secretly in her heart. She was just saying that this old man's character was a little familiar. Indeed, it was somewhat similar to Teacher Gue Yu's character. The same impulsiveness, the same fiery temper. The only difference was that Teacher Gue Yu didn't care about his reputation at all, whereas God Thief was extremely concerned about his own good name. Because of this, the moment Yi Qing Luo said that he became a coward. Chapter 520. God Thief, you want to leave this place? Yi Qing Luo's lips curled. God Thief was still angry because of the word coward as he spat out a gust of cold air. Don't you want to leave after being locked up here for a few years? Yi Qing Luo's eyes curved as she gave a crafty smile. I can save you. God Thief frowned in puzzlement as he deeply felt that after so many years of not leaving this godforsaken place, he had completely disconnected from the outside world. He totally couldn't figure out what this young lady was thinking about. Earlier when he suggested Yi Qing Luo to save him, she put on a look of disdain, as though she didn't want to bother about him. Why did she agree to save him in a blink of an eye? Before I save you, you have to tell me where is this place, why are you locked up here, do you have any way to leave? Yiqing Luo paused as the crafty and scheming look in her eyes was obvious. After finding out that this old man was God Thief, Yiqing Luo had no intention to let him off. After this, God Thief, we people in the pugilistic world, especially people like you who have a legend in the pugilistic world, you should know the logic of repaying kindness, right? God Thief was in a mess. Indeed, he hadn't used his brain for several years and totally couldn't keep up with this young lady's thoughts. This young lady wasn't fooled by him at all. Instead, she had turned the tables on him. This young lady was really quick-witted and her brain worked extremely fast. Young lady, if I have a way to leave, then I will be the one saving you, not you saving me. God Thief felt that if he were to fall into the hands of a young lady today, his reputation in this lifetime would be ruined. Yiqing Luo's brows rose as she spread out her hands. If you can save me, then you won't be chained to the wall by the profound ice shackles. Damn! This young lady's words made sense. He actually had nothing to say in reply. I'm a dignified God Thief, naturally I will repay kindness. God Thief gritted his teeth as his features turned sinister. Young lady, the prerequisite is, you are able to undo the profound ice shackles. The profound ice shackles were indestructible and it was condensed with the world's #1 armament master's powerful profound chi. In order to undo the profound ice shackles, one had to steal the key to the chain. God Thief's bright eyes flashed past an indistinct radiance. Young lady, I have a question to ask you. What problem? Who taught you that secret technique? Secret technique? Did the thief saint see her teleport and enter this prison cell? Why was it that every time she used teleportation, she would be seen through by others? Could it be that the rewards of the Purgatory Tower were all secrets that couldn't be made public? Thinking back to the last time, the ghost doctor had also seen her use the teleportation secret art. That was why he had appeared to help her when the administrator was looking for trouble, and had even taken her in as his disciple. The ghost doctor had even mentioned that it was the King of Thieves' teleportation secret technique. Saint Thief. King of Thieves, Yiqing Luo blinked her eyes. The King of Thieves. Don't tell me he's your ancestor. A ancestor. Blarg, cough, cough, cough. Holy pirate choked and coughed. His body, which was hanging on the ice chains, shook as he coughed. The chains hit the wall and made a loud noise. Yiqing Luo was at a loss, isn't it? Then how did you recognize that it's a secret technique? God Thief, who had finally stopped coughing, had no expression on his pitch-black face. Only that pair of bright eyes revealed some helplessness. Yes, that's the King of Thieves' secret technique. How did you find out about it? Chapter 521. Overlord? God Thief frowned as he searched for this name in his mind. After some time, he suddenly nodded his head. I've heard of this name before. It's rumored that he's an incredible young man. Just based on his own ability, he established his own powerhouse in Nirvana realm. His words paused and his eyes suddenly shone. I heard that the Imperial Palace has kept quite a number of rare treasures and they are absolutely not inferior to these things in Death God Castle. It was because of this that God Thief remembered Dmo Xian's name. It's him. Yiqing Luo nodded. You know the blink movement secret art? The light in God Thief's eyes dimmed slightly. He muttered Dmo Xian's name and immediately shook his head. No. Initially, he opened his mouth to talk to this young lady was because she displayed the blink movement's secret art. He wanted to find out from her mouth where she learnt this secret art from and how she learned it to such an exquisite level. Dmo Xian, could it be that the item from that year was with Dmo Xian? Could it be that your old ancestor didn't impart this secret art to you, instead? Instead, he placed it in the Purgatory Tower as the reward for the first level of Purgatory? Yiqing Luo didn't ask this question. God Thief hid the deep meaning in his eyes, and when he raised his eyes again, his eyes were filled with smiles. How would I be able to guess old ancestors' thoughts since you know the blink movement's secret art? Then it's easy. The profound ice shackles key is on that prison guard. Steal the key over. Steal. After being locked up for 10 years, he still couldn't change his thief's temper. What was on his mind was still the idea of stealing something. Yiqing Luo sat down next to God Thief as she leaned against the wall and crossed her legs. You haven't answered my earlier question. God Thief. This young lady really didn't let go of any chance. This is Death God Castle's underground prison, and those who are imprisoned here are all cultivators who had once barged into the underground prison, and their cultivation are not bad. God Thief muttered to himself for a moment and started to answer Yiqing Luo's question. Those who are able to barge into the mechanism and reach the underground prison are all cultivators who were in Death God Castle and almost succeeded. When Yiqing Luo heard that, her slender brows creased slightly as she didn't understand. In a place like Death God Castle, shouldn't they just kill the intruders after catching them? Why did they go through so much trouble to build a dungeon and lock these people up in it? This trial lasted for 10 years. What benefits did this bring to Death God Castle? Because Death God Castle needs cultivators with decent abilities to nurture into their own thieves. Holy Pirate squinted his eyes and shot out a sharp light. If you do not agree, you will be locked up here and beaten every few days until you agree. As a thief who could enter Death God Castle. He must be a famous thief in the Nirvana realm. Some of these thieves had their own teams and weren't willing to betray them. Some of them had their own pride and were unwilling to lower themselves to others. But some of them, because they could not withstand the vicious beatings every now and then, finally agreed to the Death God Castle's request and signed a life and death contract. You were beaten up for 10 years? Yiqing Luo was astonished. Even the word coward was able to agitate God Thief's pride, so how did he survive after being beaten up by these guards for 10 years? No wonder God Thief's body was riddled with scars and scabs of all sizes. Chapter 522. These people in Death God Castle were really patient. 10 years didn't agree, so they guarded for 10 years. These guards had extremely good control over the way and strength they used to beat people. Apparently they had gone through special training. Not only did they hit the most painful part of the human body, but they also didn't hurt the cultivator's meridians, in case it damaged the cultivator's ability. Yiqing Luo was about to kneel down in front of Death God Castle's Castle Lord. She had to admit that Death God Castle's Castle Lord was indeed an intelligent person. There was no lack of talents in this world, but what they lacked were talents who could be used by themselves. Making use of Death God Castle's rare treasures, they attracted numerous outstanding thieves or cultivators to come forth to steal. Following that, they fell into Death God Castle's trap and were locked in the underground prison. If they were to submit and sign the life and death contract, it would be equivalent to selling their lives to Death God Castle for the rest of their lives. Death God Castle had established their own forces and were able to call on these thieves to search for rare treasures. Later on, they placed these rare treasures in Death God Castle as publicity. It was simply too profitable. But Yiqing Luo felt that by gathering these top exponents whose lives were in their hands, it was absolutely not just to contribute to Death God Castle. Death God Castle's Castle Lord should have an even bigger plot. As long as you undo the profound ice shackles, I naturally have a way to get out. God Thief had been keeping silent all this while and couldn't help but opened his mouth to urge, steal the guard's key and help me undo the profound ice shackles first. Are you sure? Yiqing Luo felt that it wasn't reliable no matter how she heard it. If God Thief really had a way to get out, would he still be trapped here for 10 years? Although so many years have passed, but I remember clearly everything regarding Death God Castle's internal affairs. God Thief said with utmost certainty. Yiqing Luo could tell that God Thief's self-confidence was swelling continuously. Forget it, she wouldn't tease him anymore. Even if God Thief had no way to leave, Yiqing Luo intended to bring him away. Towards those with ability, she admired them. Especially this old man who was renowned in the entire Nirvana realm 10 years ago and was given the title of God Thief. Yiqing Luo naturally had the intention to rope him in. The world group was currently in the development stage and those youngsters still needed more tempering to grow step by step. If God Thief was willing to stay in the world group, it would definitely be beneficial to the world group. There's no need to go through so much trouble to steal the key. If I'm not careful and get discovered by the guards, not to mention the key, even I might end up hanging on the wall like you. Yiqing Luo walked towards God Thief as her index finger curled up as she knocked on the profound ice shackles. It was cold to the touch, and it was suffused with streams of cold light. As expected of the mystical ice shackles that were recorded in the rare treasures record, this material, this strength, it was really indescribable. If it wasn't for the sake of saving trouble, Yiqing Luo really couldn't bear to destroy this profound ice shackles. Under God Thief's astonished gaze, Yiqing Luo's fingers shook as a red feather fan blossomed with a bewitching flame glow, as though a fire elf was dancing excitedly on her fingertips. The red light flashed and transformed into a pair of sharp red blades. Crack! The profound ice shackles broke. Holy Pirate's arms suddenly drooped. He lost the support of the profound ice chain as he laid limply on the pile of straw. For the past 10 years, other than being beaten up viciously or being brought to undergo brainwashing, God Thief had always maintained the posture of being hung on the wall with his hands stretched out. His body's functions had completely stiffened and numbed. God Thief laid stiffly on the ground, and after some time, he finally moved his hands. Moving a little, his arms were very painful and weak. But no matter how he moved, he was still free. Chapter 523. Yiqing Luo's fingers clenched the feather fan tightly as she released another 2 sharp blades, slashing apart the restraints on God Thief's legs. God Thief's entire body tensed up as he trembled, as he kept on moving his body, trying his best to move his 4 limbs. He moved and propped himself up as he flipped over. He raised his hand up high, and the dim light from the fire shone into his eyes through the gaps of his fingers. God Thief inexplicably felt a sour sensation at the tip of his nose, as his eyes turned moist and hot. How many years had it been? How many years had he been imprisoned for? Finally, he was reborn. God Thief's lips revealed a relaxed smile. Young lady, this weapon of yours is just too heaven-defying, to even be able to sever the profound ice shackles. No one was clearer than him on the might of the profound ice shackles. If it wasn't for the indestructible profound ice shackles, how could he possibly be trapped in this place for 10 years? However, this young lady had effortlessly swung her fan and swung it with ease. He thought that he had to wait for Yiqing Luo to steal the key before he could be freed. Yiqing Luo's expression didn't contain any excitement or agitation. She squinted her eyes slightly as it shone with a biting cold glint. God Thief, I'm going to ask you a serious question. If we're discovered now, based on your current condition, will you be able to escape? God Thief, who was lying on the ground, raised his hand up high as it drooped down weakly. That pair of sparkling eyes were fixated on Yiqing Luo. It's too late. Yiqing Luo's eyes flashed as she displayed that set of footwork, and her petite figure instantly burrowed into the straw. At the same time, a series of orderly and powerful footsteps were heard outside the prison cell. Immediately following that team of prison guards appeared outside the prison cell. God Thief. We don't have time to waste with you. Today is the last time Castle Lord is talking to you. If you still don't know what's good for you, I'll take your life right now. The prison guard's rough voice bellowed out, and following that was the sound of a key opening the prison cell. Yiqing Luo hid in the straw as her back suddenly turned cold. Inexplicably, a dangerous and fatal feeling arose in her heart. Somehow she felt that the prison cell's temperature had dropped again, as though the air had been frozen into particles by the frost. Yiqing Luo's brows creased tightly as she heard someone walking into the prison cell. There was only the sound of footsteps. The guards didn't come in. Only one person came in, however, Castle Lord. The Castle Lord that the guard mentioned. Yiqing Luo didn't expect her luck to be so good. He had just saved Holy Pirate, and the next second, the mysterious castle master had appeared. The heavens really wanted her dead. Just the low pressure and cold air from the Castle Lord's entrance had already made Yiqing Luo sense a fatal danger. Yiqing Luo did not move at all. Through the gaps of the straw, she saw a tall and straight figure. Under the dim light, he looked slightly thin. This lord of the castle was extremely dangerous. Unfortunately, he discovered that the profound ice chains had been cut. If he wanted to escape with Holy Pirate, it would be as difficult as ascending to heaven. Saint Pirate, the castle lord's gentle voice seemed to be wrapped in a thick layer of frost, chilly and without the slightest emotion. He stood in front of Holy Pirate. He quietly looked at Holy Pirate on the ground. There was no surprise, no panic. Silence. There was a deathly silence. The surrounding air seemed to condense even more intensely. Yi Qing Luo felt that it was difficult to even breathe. This castle lord's aura was just too strong. Holy Pirate, who was lying on the ground, was cursing in his heart. This stinky brat didn't come earlier or later, but just when he had just touched his freedom. Stinky brat, I'm telling you, you. Chapter 524. Apparently, the castle lord's words weren't meant for God Thief. Then. This sentence was meant for the third person in the prison cell, Yi Qing Luo, to hear. He had indeed discovered her. Yi Qing Luo knew in her heart that there was no way she could avoid this castle lord. His powerful aura was not inferior to Dmo Xian. Discovering her was something that would happen sooner or later. So Yi Qing Luo couldn't be bothered to hide as she lifted the straw. That straw was like a fairy scattering flowers, as it directly flew out. The straw was damp and there was a fishy smell. How dare you? Who are you? How dare you barge into Death God Castle? The prison head, who was standing outside the prison cell, saw an unfamiliar lady in the cell and his expression instantly turned gloomy. Especially when he saw the pile of straw that the lady had lifted, as it scattered onto the castle lord. How dare you be so rude to the castle lord? The prison head's expression changed as he swiftly rushed forward, drawing out his broadsword and slashed towards Yi Qing Luo. Bam! Before he could get close to Yi Qing Luo, the prison head seemed to be swept up by something as his body crashed heavily onto the wall, rolling onto the ground. The 10 overguards standing outside the prison cell were all dumbstruck, as they looked at the castle lord in astonishment. Yi Qing Luo was also astonished. Earlier, when the prison head slashed his broadsword over, she was just about to retaliate when she saw the castle lord standing opposite her, his sleeves fluttering as a burst of energy sent the prison head flying. This castle lord. Had he taken the wrong medicine? Attacking one's own people? Yi Qing Luo narrowed her eyes as she started to size up the castle lord in front of her seriously. His jet black hair danced in the air, not tied up or tied up. The first thing that attracted Yi Qing Luo was his eyes. It was a pair of cold, aloof, and arrogant eyes that glowed with a cold light. No desires, as calm as still water. It was as if nothing in the world could enter his eyes. He gave off a kind of coldness which made one's scalp go numb, as though it was covered with frost. That kind of coldness was emitted from his bones, a coldness towards all living things in the world. He just stood there, giving off a feeling of disdain towards the world. He was cold, but that face seemed as though it was sculpted by God's craftsmanship, full of vigor. What made Yi Qing Luo even more astonished was that this person was wearing a blood-red long robe. It was fiery red like blood, representing passion and an evil charm that could charm the world. Such a cold youth was definitely not suitable for such a color. However, when he wore this red, he gave off a different aura. It did not feel out of place at all. Meeting his eyes, Yi Qing Luo felt as though her entire body was wrapped in ice as she subconsciously shivered. You. Yi Qing Luo opened her mouth, but her throat felt dry and uncomfortable. But Yi Qing Luo discovered that when she opened her mouth to spit out a word, she clearly saw a sliver of faintly discernible light in that pair of castle lord's unperturbed eyes, which seemed to have no focus at all. After some time, he didn't manage to wait for Yi Qing Luo's next words. The lord of the castle frowned as a fierce look flashed across his eyes. Have we met before? Yi Qing Luo frowned slightly and finally found her voice. He felt that this person's face was very familiar. He must have seen this person somewhere before. But at this moment, she couldn't remember. When he heard Yi Qing Luo asking this question, a fierce look flashed past Castle Lord's eyes. He took large strides towards Yi Qing Luo. What pounced on her was the cold arrogant aura which the Castle Lord brought. Yi Qing Luo's heart shuddered as the alarm went off and she speedily retreated backwards. But her legs had not even moved a single step. That Castle Lord was already standing in front of her. Toes against toes. His loose black hair on his shoulders, because of the cold wind, floated onto Yi Qing Luo's face. Chapter 525. Yi Qing Luo wanted to retreat. Castle Lord stretched out his long arm and held her waist tightly without any explanation. Yi Qing Luo's petite body turned stiff. Originally she thought that this young man was icy cold all over. But his palms and his chest were emitting a scorching heat. Yi Qing Luo was fixed in his arms and she could even feel the two palms which were pressed against his chest, emitting waves after waves of powerful heartbeat. She wanted to struggle but her hands were held tightly by him, totally immovable. Let go of me. Yi Qing Luo gritted her teeth. Damn it. Was this so-called Castle Lord really sick? If he was sick, go and seek treatment. What was he trying to do by taking advantage of her without any explanation? Yi Qing Luo's struggle made the viciousness in Castle Lord's eyes intensified as the aura he was emitting turned even colder. As Yi Qing Luo struggled, she raised her head and stared at him. Then she met a pair of eyes which were surging with raging waves. Sharp, cold and severe. It was filled with dense murderous intent. This gaze made Yi Qing Luo shocked. Can't remember me? Castle Lord's arm which was holding her waist was extremely strong, as though he was going to break her waist. Yi Qing Luo frowned in pain. She twisted her body uneasily but met with an even stronger restraint from the young man. What did he mean by this? Could it be that they had met each other before? Hey! Stinky brat, I'm the one who threatened that young lady to save me. Whatever you want to do, come at me, what's the point of hugging a young lady? God Thief, who was lying on the ground, climbed up with his stiff limbs. His body was wobbling. However, Castle Lord totally didn't turn his gaze over. Only a pair of deep eagle-like black eyes stared coldly at Yi Qing Luo. Yi Qing Luo's brows were tightly knitted and she wasn't able to answer his question, as he lost his patience and pushed her away in frustration. Yi Qing Luo was suddenly flung out. The direction was towards God Thief. She staggered and knocked onto God Thief. Yi Qing Luo immediately steadied herself and held onto God Thief as she pulled God Thief back by a step. This young man. The word dangerous was written on him. Yi Qing Luo didn't feel that she was his match. If he wanted to escape with Holy Pirate, it would be as difficult as climbing up to the sky. Yi Qing Luo. Castle Lord stared at her as his gaze grew deeper and clearer. Have you forgotten about me? His voice was low and deep, as cold as ice. But behind this coldness, there was a trace of bitterness. Resentment? This phrase flashed past Yi Qing Luo's mind as she shuddered. This youth had called out her name. When on earth had she met him? From his tone, it seemed that they were very familiar with each other. Good, very good, you've really forgotten about me. Castle Lord chuckled. As he smiled, his expressionless face became increasingly eerie. He took a step back, and his slender body swayed slightly. Anger, monstrous anger, burned in his eyes. That pair of icy cold eyes was like an ice blade, fiercely piercing towards Yi Qing Luo. You've forgotten about me, I'll let you think carefully, who on earth am I? The whirlpools in his eyes gathered into a storm. His words had just ended when his 5 fingers turned into an eagle and directly clasped onto Yi Qing Luo's neck. Damn! He was indeed sick. He struck out as he said he would. Yi Qing Luo's heart was in a great shock as she swept her feet and sidestepped his hand. At the same time, a feather fan appeared on her fingertips as it shot out an enchanting red glow, like a whirlwind, striking towards Castle Lord. Castle Lord didn't expect Yi Qing Luo's reaction to be so swift, nor did he expect Yi Qing Luo to strike out at him. Chapter 526. Castle Lord. When the guards at the prison cell's entrance saw that, they cried out in panic. A guard directly pounced forward, blocking in front of the castle lord. That whirlwind directly struck the guard's chest. "You want to kill me?" The castle lord's expression turned gloomier and gloomier, as though it was covered with a layer of frost, as an intense chill shot out from his eyes. "You actually want to kill me? You're sick." Yi Qing Luo kept her feather fan as she stared at him vigilantly. "You're allowed to kill me, but I'm not allowed to retaliate? Your life is mine. If I want you to die, then you have to die." The castle lord's gloomy eyes were swirling with a whirlpool, as though it was going to swallow up everything around it. Yi Qing Luo's brows creased as she was stared at by that pair of eyes until her hair stood on end. She was absolutely certain that this castle lord was sick. And it wasn't a light illness. Yi Qing Luo couldn't be bothered to tangle with this castle lord who had a hole in his brain. That bunch of brothers of hers were still waiting for her at the exquisite pagoda. "My life is my own, no one can control my life." Yi Qing Luo squinted her eyes slightly as her lips curled into an enchanting smile. "Castle Lord keeps saying that I've forgotten about you, yet still acting so irritable. Could it be I'm Castle Lord's dream lover?" Her tone was extremely frivolous, with a hint of a Casanova flirting with a decent lady. But this frivolous tone made one unable to feel annoyed. Those guards who were holding on to the head of the prison guard and those injured guards were all shocked. They stared at Yi Qing Luo with their mouths agape, totally unable to believe that there was such a shameless, audacious lady in this world. Yi Qing Luo's meaning was very obvious. She was ridiculing the castle lord for pestering her endlessly. Which meant that she totally didn't know the castle lord. And narcissistically treating herself as the castle lord's dream lover. But the castle lord indeed didn't seem right. If it was any other intruder, even if it was a lady, in the castle lord's eyes, she was just a tool to work for Death God Castle. They had never seen their castle lord treating a lady like this. No, to put it more accurately, they had never seen their castle lord being so attentive towards anyone. In the eyes of the castle lord, no one could be tolerated. In this way, the raging fury in the dungeon guards' hearts towards Yi Qing Luo slowly subsided. "Today my thoughts are indeed a little chaotic. Why don't we meet again another day and have a good chat, how about that?" Yi Qing Luo's eyes narrowed as her lips curled into a charming smile, becoming more and more flirtatious. Her smile was like a blossoming mandala, releasing a soul-stirring charm. The castle lord was still expressionless, but his frosty eyes were faintly flickering with a faint luster. Just at this moment, the feather fan in Yi Qing Luo's hands suddenly opened up. All the straw in the dungeon was swept up by the whirlwind. That speed was extremely fast. In an instant, all of them covered the castle lord's body. The straw had an extremely pungent smell. Before the guards could react, they felt a whirlwind blow past them. In the cell, apart from the castle lord, who was covered in straw and resembled a wooden stake, there was no one else. "Castle master." The guards were all alarmed. "Chase them. Give chase. Stop that woman and god thief. Go and shoot the signal flare." Some guards swiftly reacted as they stood up and ran while shouting for their companions. "No need." Her cold voice was light and slow. But it was filled with an irresistible charisma. The guards' footsteps halted. The guards who were surrounding the castle lord, helping him to sweep away the smelly straw on his body, were all stunned. Earlier when he was facing that young lady, he was fierce and evil, shouting for her to kill. Now, their castle lord intentionally let that young lady go. Not hesitating to let that young lady sweep his entire body with smelly straw. Chapter 527. Yi Qing Luo brought God Thief along as she executed her blink movement, and in a blink of an eye, she teleported to the place where the guards were resting. Her sharp vision swept the surroundings and very quickly, she saw a stone door in front of the guards' resting room. This should be the exit. She had not wasted her efforts to calculate the location of the guard's resting room in her mind. Yiqing Luo turned her head towards the direction of God Thief's locked prison cell and didn't hear any footsteps chasing up to them. She heaved a sigh of relief. Earlier when she led God Thief to execute his blink movement, she actually had no confidence. After all, she had only comprehended less than 20% of the blink movement's secret art. Just her alone blink movement was already a little strenuous. Bringing God Thief along to blink movement, the success rate wasn't high. But just as she condensed her profound chi onto the glower flame fan and swept up that whirlwind, preparing to pull God Thief along to try to execute her blink movement, God Thief's hoarse voice rang beside her ears. Listen carefully to the incantation that I'm going to recite. Direct the incantation towards your profound heart jade and combine it with your original blink movement's secret art. Without waiting for her reaction, a string of complicated incantation was transmitted into her ears. Luckily her memory was strong and her reaction was godly. At the same time when she heard the incantation, she swiftly recited the incantation and followed God Thief's instructions. She successfully brought God Thief along and teleported successfully. At this moment, Yiqing Luo had no time to ask God Thief why he knew the blink movement's secret art. Are you able to keep up with our current actions? Yiqing Luo glanced sideways at God Thief as she supported him and walked slowly towards the stone door. Although God Thief's limbs moved slightly, but after all he had been restrained for 10 years and his body's various functions weren't able to return to normal so quickly. Every single step he took was supported by Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo had already touched the stone door's switch. Seeing the stone door slowly opening up, revealing the pitch black and strange secret passage, Yiqing Luo glanced sideways at God Thief whose face was filled with embarrassment and didn't say anything more as she directly squatted down in front of him. God Thief was stunned. After waiting quietly for a moment, Yiqing Luo became impatient as she patted his shoulder. Quickly. If they chase up to us, none of us will be able to escape. God Thief's pitch black face didn't show any emotions. He pursed his dry lips as his bright eyes sparkled with an unknown dark emotion. This little girl, why was it so different? You could have left me behind. Before he could finish his words, Yiqing Luo could no longer tolerate it as her body arched downwards, forcefully carrying his body on her back. God Thief obviously sensed that Yiqing Luo's breathing had turned heavier. Although he had suffered miserably in the dungeon over the past 10 years, and his entire body had become thinner, he was still able to maintain his composure. But he was still a man. Yiqing Luo didn't hesitate as she carried him on her back and directly walked into the secret tunnel. He stared at this girl who looked extremely thin, but was filled with great hope. Holy Pirate's heart, which had been silent for 10 years, slowly came back to life. Looks like the turning point of his fate had really arrived. One harbored such thoughts while the other was concentrating on searching for the map drawn by Dmo Xian in her mind. No one noticed that after they stepped into the secret passage, the stone door behind them quickly closed. Before it closed, a pair of bone-chilling, yet complicated eyes stared at them without blinking. Fort Master. The guard beside him was so frightened that he couldn't guess what the Fort Master was thinking. The Fort Master's eyes were cold. Just one look seemed to make one fall into an ice cellar, chilling to the bone. She wasn't pretending. The way she looked at him was as though she was looking at a stranger. She had really forgotten about him. Had forgotten who he was? Chapter 528. After stepping into the secret tunnel, Yiqing Luo was initially still very cautious, afraid that there were any mechanisms or arrays. After walking for a long distance, they did not encounter any danger. After turning a corner, Yiqing Luo heaved a sigh of relief when she saw the secret tunnels extending in all directions. Finally, it was the secret passage on the map. Yiqing Luo searched for her current location in her mind and found the secret tunnel in the direction of the exquisite pagoda as she headed straight for it. Young lady, the direction to leave is that way. God Thief laid on Yiqing Luo's shoulder as he reminded her. Yi Qing Luo's footsteps didn't stop as she followed the map in her memory and the array marked by DMO Xian, speedily avoiding every single array. Even though she was carrying Holy Pirate on her back, it did not slow her down. The strange footwork under his feet continued to be displayed. Holy Pirate furrowed his eyebrows. His eyes were filled with confusion. However, he didn't open his mouth to remind her again. Yi Qing Luo was able to accurately avoid all the arrays that were set up, and when faced with numerous secret passageways, she didn't hesitate to choose a passageway to advance swiftly. Clearly, he knew where these secret passages led to. As Yi Qing Luo walked forward, she scanned the surroundings. Along the way, he didn't see any signs of a fight or blood stains in the secret passage. Yi Qing Luo heaved a sigh of relief as they neared the direction of the exquisite pagoda's secret chamber. However, he didn't have the time to finish exhaling. Yi Qing Luo's footsteps suddenly halted. The expression on his face was somewhat grave. She could hear the sounds of fighting coming from the secret chamber where the exquisite pagoda was hidden. Maybe it was because he had smelled the bloody stench of Holy Pirate on his back for a long time. At this moment, the smell of fresh blood that seeped into his nose was extremely strong. Our brothers are in trouble. Yi Qing Luo's pupils contracted as she increased her speed and directly rushed into the secret room. There were several luminous pearls hanging in the secret chamber. It illuminated the entire secret chamber. The secret chamber was already in chaos. The youngsters of the World Group were wielding their weapons as they battled with a bunch of cultivators dressed in green robes with mercenary group badges on their chests. Iron-blooded knights. Yi Qing Luo saw the totem on the mercenary group badge. Wasn't he Yuchi Peng's Iron Blood Knight? There were quite a number of Iron Blood Knights, at least 40 of them. 30 over people were fighting with the World Group's youngsters. The remaining dozen or so people took out 3 interspatial bags and tossed all the rare treasures in the secret chamber into them. An interspatial pocket was a magical artifact that was second only to an interspatial ring. Normally, a space pocket could only hold 100 items at most. He really didn't want to let go of even the slightest bit of advantage. Yi Qing Luo narrowed her eyes. Those people who were still in battle had not discovered her arrival. Yi Qing Luo placed God Thief in a corner. Wait for me here. Saying that, Yi Qing Luo clenched the feather fan in her hands tightly as she stood up and walked towards the World Group's direction. The leader of the Iron Blood Warriors was Yuchi Peng. Yan Xiaoyi and Xiao Jin trapped Yuchi Peng together and fought with him. Yuchi Peng's weapon was a huge axe. As he brandished it, it brought along a strong burst of profound energy, forcing Yan Xiaoyi and Xiao Jin to join forces, before they could barely block his gigantic axe. Whereas at this moment, behind Yan Xiaoyi and Xiao Jin, an Iron Blood Warrior cultivator got close to them as he silently raised the huge blade in his hands and directly chopped down towards their heads. Yi Qing Luo's expression congealed as the feather fan in her hands opened up and numerous iron wires flew out, directly coiling around that cultivator's neck. Her fingers clasped the feather fan tightly as she pulled with all her might. The Iron Blood Warrior cultivator's body was flung towards Yuchi Peng. Chapter 529. Instantly, flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Yan Xiaoyi and Xiao Jin reacted in time as they speedily retreated, evading the huge axe's profound chi fluctuations. Qing Luo. On seeing that familiar figure appearing in front of them, the both of them were overjoyed. The other youngsters who were battling heard Yan Xiaoyi's voice and immediately turned their gazes over. Indeed, they saw that slender figure standing in front of Yuchi Peng. Her posture was outstanding as she stood upright. Her pair of charming eyes were like torches, as though it was tainted with endless frost as she stared coldly at Yuchi Peng. She didn't look at them. But the youngsters could feel Yi Qing Luo's worry towards them. Their hearts, which had been hanging in suspense, mysteriously calmed down. As long as Yi Qing Luo was here, everything would not be a problem. There was no difficulty which could obstruct their footsteps. They had already barged into Death God Castle and obtained the exquisite pagoda. Were they still afraid of the Iron Blood Warriors? Trying to spoil their mission, trying to disintegrate the world group? No. But they could. The youngsters' battle intent was instantly ignited at the instance when Yiqing Luo appeared. God Thief, who was sitting in the corner, trying his best to loosen up his muscles, and when he saw this scene, a sliver of astonishment flashed past his eyes. These youngsters actually exploded with energy which made him feel overwhelmed in an instant. Their gazes were filled with a confident glow. Was it because of Yiqing Luo's appearance? It seemed as though these youngsters' gazes were indeed revolving around the young lady. Heh. Indeed, a lass who was filled with surprises. He was getting more and more interested in this lass. At this moment, Yiqing Luo didn't know what God Thief was thinking about. Her cold gaze swept past Yuqi Peng in disdain as her lips curled into a sneer of ridicule. Eldest young master Yuqi is such a filthy person. What's the logic of snatching the mission which had already been given away? Given away? You're obviously the one who snatched it away forcefully. Yuqi Peng's eyes burst out with an eerie viciousness. This originally belongs to me. If you don't have the ability to keep this mission, then don't try to be brave. Yiqing Luo sneered. That's right, if you don't have the ability to keep the mission, then why try to be brave? Now you're like a sinister rat, playing tricks behind the scenes, which really suits your Yuqi family style. Yuqi Peng's expression turned stiff. Yiqing Luo's words were obviously mocking him. In the mercenary guild, he was the one who couldn't hold on to the mission and gave it to the world group. A wisp of faintly discernible black energy flashed past Yuqi Peng's eyes. His hand, which was holding the huge axe, tightened as he directly chopped towards Yiqing Luo. What are you talking about? Speak with your ability. When the axe chopped down, it brought about an extremely strong fluctuation of Xian Qi. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes as she speedily took half a step back. Her eyes were filled with coldness as she curled her lips in disdain. Is young Master Yuqi so afraid of the world group? He actually didn't hesitate to use his own soul to make a deal. Looks like the Yuqi family's fate has come to an end. It was just as she and Old Man Song had guessed. This Yuqi Peng attached the aura of the dark forces onto the giant axe. Such a deal could easily end up like what happened to Yiqing Ling in the past, where her soul was completely devoured by the dark forces' profound yin qi. The reason why Yuqi Peng was so confident was indeed because of the deal with the dark forces. Hearing Yiqing Luo's words, Yuqi Peng's expression changed slightly. His gloomy eyes were filled with coldness. Occasionally, a wisp of black gas would flash past. You. How did you know? How did you know about the dark forces' energy? How did you know that he had used his soul to make a deal? His deepest hidden secret had been discovered by Yiqing Luo. He was even ridiculed by Yiqing Luo. This was as though his pride had been stepped on fiercely by Yiqing Luo. Chapter 530. Yiqing Luo's eyes sunk slightly. In her mind, Old Man Sung sighed worriedly. If the dark force's energy was residing in Yuqi Peng's courtyard, then perhaps Yuqi Peng could still be saved. But now, Yuqi Peng chose to let the dark force's energy to attach itself to him at any time and place. Now that he was exposed by Yiqing Luo, his heart suffered a heavy blow. A restless and uneasy heart had an opening, allowing the dark force's energy to swiftly swallow Yuqi Peng's soul. When Yiqing Luo heard that, she recalled the previous Yiqing Ling. After she was controlled by the dark forces, she became a marionette. That energy was extremely strong. If the dark force's energy was completely merged with Yuqi Peng, then it would be even harder to deal with. This mission, Iron Blood Warriors must take it. Yuqi Peng suppressed the panic and fear in his heart from being seen through, as he waved the huge axe in his hand, chopping towards Yiqing Luo's head. Yiqing Luo's lips curled upwards, as the feather fan in her hand spun, condensing profound qi into the feather fan, shooting out numerous bewitching red rays, like sharp blades, meeting Yuqi Peng's attack. Yiqing Luo resisted Yuqi Peng's attack. Moreover, it was a relaxed look, without any pressure at all. When Yan Xiao Yi and Xiao Jin saw this, they were reassured. At the same time, they joined the other youngsters' battle. Momentarily, the entire secret room was in chaos, as the blood stench became thicker. In mid-air, the red ray's sharp blade spun, encircling Yuchi Peng's surroundings once. Following that, like a whirlwind, it directly spun towards Yiqing Luo's direction. Yiqing Luo's slender hand stretched out, as she caught the feather fan steadily. The next second, her feet were like the wind, as she speedily closed in on Yuchi Peng. Yuchi Peng's huge axe looked heavy, but when he waved it, it was extremely nimble. His reaction was extremely swift, as that axe blocked Yiqing Luo's flying red ray's sharp blades. Only, when he blocked the last sharp blade, his back suddenly felt a chill. He saw Yiqing Luo, who was originally standing 10 steps away from him, suddenly appearing behind his back. He raised his huge axe, speedily turned around and chopped downwards. This turn, he saw that crafty sneer in Yiqing Luo's eyes. At the same time, Yuchi Peng felt a dull pain on his chest. He saw Yiqing Luo had unknowingly slipped out a dagger from the handle of that feather fan. The dagger pierced into his chest without missing an inch. Immediately following that, Yiqing Luo's slender hand slapped hard on the other side of his chest. The inertia caused Yuchi Peng's body to fly backwards. He pulled out the dagger that was stuck in his chest. His entire body smashed into the wall of the secret chamber. Yuchi Peng was in so much pain that his entire face contorted into a ball, as his pair of sinister and spicy eyes stared fiercely at Yiqing Luo. It was as if he wanted to tear her into pieces. Yiqing Luo pulled out a handkerchief from her sleeve and gently wiped the dagger on the handle of the fan. That posture, that attitude, was almost cold and merciless. Eldest young Master Yuchi, even if this mission is given to you, do you really think that you have this life to hand in this mission? Yiqing Luo sneered, as she casually threw that blood-stained handkerchief onto the ground. She slowly walks towards Yuchi Peng, her steps are light and her posture is elegant. A sense of fear arose in Yuchi Peng's heart for no reason. After being stabbed by Yiqing Luo, followed by a palm strike, he could feel the energy in his body gradually disappearing. Yiqing Luo's stab was very accurate. It was just a finger's distance away from his heart. It made him feel so much pain that he wished he was dead, but it didn't take his life. Chapter 531. Yiqing Luo looked disdainfully at him from above as her eyes were filled with disdain. Yuchi Peng, think about it carefully. The Iron Blood Knights that you've worked so hard to manage, who are you going to hand over to as the group leader? Yuchi Peng's expression turned even more subservient. He was so angry that his entire body was twitching and shaking. The wound on his chest was getting more and more painful. Fresh blood kept gushing out, and in an instant, it had dyed his green long robe into blooming red flowers. You dare to kill me? Yuchi Peng clenched his teeth as he squeezed out these few words with extreme difficulty. His forehead was covered with cold sweat. Until now, Yuchi Peng still couldn't believe that he possessed such powerful strength. His profound grade had also risen by 3 grades because of this huge axe, surging straight into Earth profound grade. In just one move, he was defeated in the hands of a young lass who was still wet behind her ears. Kill you? Do you need me to do it? Yiqing Luo sneered in disdain as she squinted her eyes as she looked at the huge axe in his hand with a smile which didn't look like a smile. You. This was simply a naked humiliation. Yuchi Peng was so angry that he gritted his teeth as a ball of red emerged on his pale face due to the raging flames. Smart eldest young Master Yuchi, still haven't discovered it? Yiqing Luo's brows rose slightly as the arc on her lips became extremely ridiculing. What do you mean? Yuchi Peng realized the strangeness in Yiqing Luo's words as his heart suddenly contracted. An ominous premonition started to spread from the bottom of his heart. His question didn't get an answer. Yiqing Luo smiled lightly as that long and narrow eyes curled into an alluring arc. That pair of charming eyes was fixed on a certain spot. Yuchi Peng followed her gaze as he looked over. In a split second, his entire face turned as white as paper. His pupils widened as his entire body started to tremble uncontrollably. He saw the blood oozing out from his chest. Those drops of blood formed a bloodline, and with an extremely fast speed, it flowed towards the huge axe in his right hand. Yuchi-Peng's pupils continued to expand. What was going on? This huge axe actually sucked human blood? The surrounding Iron Blood Warriors cultivators and the World Group's youngsters were all stunned by this scene. They watched in disbelief as the densely packed bloodline spread out on Yuchi-Peng's body. Making a deal with your soul doesn't mean that you will give your soul to the other party after you die. Yi-Ching Luo looked at his terrified and flustered look, watching him struggling on his deathbed as she laughed softly. Living souls are much more delicious than dead souls. What the dark forces want is the soul that you leave first. Yi-Ching Luo's slender fingers pressed against her lower jaw. Her curved eyes were filled with an enchanting smile. Save me. Because of fear, Yuchi-Peng's entire face was already distorted, looking sinister and terrifying. No wonder he felt his strength draining away so quickly. No wonder he felt like he couldn't muster any strength. You know, this is a soul exchange. You can definitely save me. There was no one who did not fear death. Especially someone like Yuchi-Peng, who was extremely ambitious. How could he bear to die now? There are conditions for saving you. Yi-Ching Luo's eyes were cold. Yuchi-Peng hurriedly nodded his head. As long as you save me, I will agree to any request. I promise you everything. Yi-Ching Luo's vision revolved around the surroundings. All of you have heard that right. Those cultivators who were scared silly were now in a dazed state. Perhaps it was because Yi-Ching Luo's aura was too strong. When Yi-Ching Luo's gaze fell onto them, all of them subconsciously straightened their backs. Heard it. Yi-Ching Luo looked towards Mo Han Shang. Chapter 532. Mo Han Shang's identity was the most powerful proof. He wasn't afraid that Yuchi-Peng would regret. Unless he didn't want to mingle in the mercenary world anymore. Then, I'll save you. Yi-Ching Luo took a step back as she looked at Yuchi-Peng's malevolent and twisted face as her lips curled cruelly. But, can you take it? Yes. I can. As long as I can keep my life. I can take any kind of pain. Yuchi-Peng felt that the blood in his body was almost sucked dry. His face turned paler and paler, and he didn't even have the energy to open his mouth to speak. His heart was getting more and more flustered as he kept urging Yi-Ching Luo. Yi-Ching Luo squinted her eyes as her expression was calm without even blinking as she shook the feather fan in her hands. A red ray sharp blade shot out. Ah! A miserable shriek was heard from Yuchi-Peng's mouth. That hand which was holding the huge axe was directly chopped off. Fresh blood started to gush out. At the instance when his hand was chopped off, Yuchi-Peng's energy which he had lost instantly returned to his body. He was in so much pain that he kept rolling on the ground. Iron Blood Warriors cultivators were all dumbstruck. Yi-Ching Luo actually chopped off their group leader's hand? But they didn't dare to say a single word. They were afraid of Yi-Ching Luo. A 14 or 15-year-old young lady, after doing such a cruel thing, could still display such calmness. Even that pair of cold and charming eyes didn't have the slightest fluctuation. Yi-Ching Luo, you. Yuchi-Peng was in so much pain that he curled up into a ball as the fury and hatred in his heart surged up at this instance. She chopped off his hand. He wanted to hold the huge axe, the hand which led the Iron Blood Warriors into battle. But it was chopped off just like that. From now onwards, he had become a cripple. What about me? Isn't this to save you? Yi-Ching Luo raised her brows disapprovingly. If not for this, do you think you still have the energy to howl so loudly? Yuchi-Peng's eyes, which were filled with fury, instantly choked. He was stunned for a moment as he endured the intense pain in his wrist. Indeed, earlier he didn't even have the energy to speak, not to mention rolling on the ground, or even flying into a rage at Yi-Ching Luo. That feeling of his body being sucked dry, the feeling of his energy being sucked dry, had disappeared. But If his hand was chopped off, how would he be able to wield an axe in the future? How would he be able to enter the battlefield? He could have just told him to throw away that giant axe, so why did he still? The dark force's energy is the profounding chi. Once it absorbs your living soul, will you be able to struggle free from that broken axe? Yi Qing Luo seemed to have seen through Yuchi Peng's thoughts as she sneered. Even if she could really throw away that axe, Yi Qing Luo would not say it out. She wasn't a kind-hearted person, and towards a person like Yuchi Peng, if she didn't teach him a lesson, it would truly make Nan Ping furious. What kind of place was Death God Castle? This was a place that made countless thieves tremble in fear. She could understand that Yuchi Peng wanted to take back the mission. But Yi Qing Luo couldn't understand why Yuchi Peng actually started a fight with the world group in Death God Castle's secret room. If he triggered the mechanism, he would have the power of the dark forces to protect himself. But what about the others? Ever since Yi Qing Luo had the idea of establishing a mercenary group, the world group's youngsters were her reverse scale. She had merely chopped off one of Yuchi Peng's hand, and that was already considered as being merciful. Yi Qing Luo's half-squinted eyes were icy cold as her mind recalled the time when she was in the underground prison, seeing that sick castle lord as she shuddered. You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.